Hey everybody, good morning if you're watching this in the morning, good afternoon if you're watching this afternoon, good evening if you're watching this evening. So here we are at chapter 9, the little cabinet of the Tuileries. We will now leave Villefort traveling with all speed to Paris and pass into the little cabinet of the Tuileries, which is, with its arched windows, which is so well known as being the favorite cabinet of Napoleon, Louis XVIII, and Louis Philippe. There, seated at a walnut table which he had brought from Hartwell, and to which he was greatly attached, King Louis XVIII was listlessly listening to a grey-haired, well-groomed, aristocratic-looking man of 50 or 52 years of age, and was at the same time making notes on the margin of a volume of the Griffius edition of Horace, an edition full of inaccuracies, but nevertheless much valued, from which his Majesty drew many of his wise philosophical conversations. "What did you say?" the king inquired. "That I am somewhat harassed, sire." "Really? What carking care is on your mind, my dear Blacas?" "Sire, I have every reason to believe that a storm is brewing in the south." "Well, my dear Duke," Louis XVIII replied, "I believe that you are misinformed, for I know for certain that the weather is very fine in that quarter." Intellectual as he was, Louis XVIII was very fond of a pleasant jest. "Sire," Monsieur de Blacas continued, "if only to ease the mind of a faithful servant, could your Majesty not send to Languedoc province and Dauphine some trustworthy men who could report on the feeling of these three provinces?" "Canamus surdus," answered the king, continuing his annotations. "Sire," the courtier laughingly replied, "as you appear to understand the hemistich of the poet of Venusia, it is only fitting that your Majesty should believe in the good feeling of France. Nevertheless, I do think I am quite wrong in fearing some desperate attempt." "By whom?" "By Bonaparte, or at any rate his party." "My dear Blacas," replied the king, "your alarms prevent me from working, and your feeling of security, sire, prevents me from sleeping." "Wait, my dear Duke, wait a moment. I have a happy note on a pastor quam talet. You can continue afterwards." There was a moment's silence, during which Louis XVIII wrote in as minute a handwriting as possible a note on the margin of his Horace, which having finished, he said, rising with the satisfied air of a man who thinks he has an idea of his own, because he has commented on the idea of another. "Continue, my dear Duke, I'm listening." "Sire," Blacas said, for one moment hoping to use Villefort to his own advantage, "I must tell you that these are not mere meaningless rumors and idle tales that disquiet me. A man of strong common sense, meriting all my confidence, and charged to me by watch over the south," the Duke uttered these last words hesitantly, "has arrived in all haste to bring me news that a great danger threatens the king. I came without delay to you, sire." "Mala duces avi donum," Louis XVIII continued, still making his notes. "Ah, here is Monsieur d'André." You did say Monsieur d'André?" he asked of the chamberlain who had just announced the minister of police. "Yes, sire, Baron d'André." "You have just come at the right moment," said Louis. "Come, Baron, and tell the Duke your latest news of Monsieur Bonaparte. Do not conceal anything, no matter how serious. Is the Isle of Elba a volcano from which will issue a bloody, death-bearing war? Bella, horrida bella." Monsieur d'André balanced himself gracefully on the back of a chair on which he was leaning his hands and said, "Has your Majesty been pleased to peruse yesterday's report?" Yes, but give the Duke the contents of the report. Tell him exactly what the usurper is doing on the island." "Monsieur," said the Baron to the Duke, "all his Majesty's faithful servants have good reason to rejoice at the latest news that has reached us from Elba. Bonaparte," Monsieur d'André looked at Louis, who, busily engaged in writing a note, did not even raise his head. "Bonaparte is bored to distraction," continued the Baron. "He spends whole days watching his miners at work at Porto-Longin. Moreover, we have ascertained that it will not be very long before the usurper is quite insane. His brain is giving way. One moment he is weeping bitterly, the next laughing boisterously. At other times he will spend hours on the shore throwing pebbles into the water, and if he succeeds in making 5 or 6 ducks and drakes, he is as pleased with himself as if he had won another Marengo or a second Austerlitz. You must agree with me that these are sure signs of insanity." "Or else signs of wisdom, monsieur," smiled Louis. The great captains of olden times amused themselves by casting pebbles into the sea. See Plutarch's Life of Scipio Africanus. Well, Blocka, the king continued triumphantly, what do you say to that? I say, sire, that either the Minister of Police is mistaken, or else I am. But as this would be impossible for a Minister of Police who has the safe custody of your Majesty in his keeping, it is probably I who am under the wrong impression. Nevertheless, sire, I would question before your Majesty the gentleman of whom I spoke just now. In fact, I beg your Majesty to do him this honor. Most willingly, Duke. Under your auspices, I will receive him who you will, but I must receive him armed to the teeth. Have you a louder report than this one, Dondre? This one is dated February the 20th, and today is March the 3rd. No, sire, I am expecting one hourly. I have been out since early morning, and it is possible that one has arrived during my absence. Then hie you to your office, and do not forget that I am waiting for you. I go, sire, and shall be gone but 10 minutes. In the meantime, sire, said Monsieur de Blacas, I will fetch my messenger. He has covered 220 leagues in barely 3 days. Why all this unnecessary fatigue and anxiety when we have the telegraph, which takes but 3 or 4 hours? Ah, sire, that is poor recompense for Monsieur de Villefort, who has come all that distance with such haste to communicate to your Majesty some valuable information. Monsieur de Villefort? Exclaimed the king. Is that the messenger's name? Yes, sire, I thought the name was known to your Majesty. Not at all. Not at all, Blacas. He is a serious-minded and intellectual man, and above all he's ambitious. Added to that, his father's name is Notier. Notier the gridiron. Notier the senator. The very same. And your Majesty has employed the son of such a man? Blacas, my dear friend, you are very slow of understanding. I told you that Villefort was ambitious. He would sacrifice everything to gain his end, even his father. Go and fetch him. When Blacas returned with Villefort, the king said, The Duke of Blacas tells me you have some important information. Give me full details, if you please, and above all begin at the beginning. I like order in all things. Sire, Villefort answered, I will give your Majesty a faithful report. I have come to Paris with all speed to inform your Majesty that, in the exercise of my duties, I have discovered a conspiracy. Not one of those everyday, meaningless, vulgar plots of the lower classes of our people, but a veritable tempest which threatens your Majesty's very throne. Sire, the usurper has manned 3 vessels. He meditates some attack, senseless perhaps, yet it may have terrible consequences. By this time he will have left Elba, bound for I know not whither. He will most probably attempt to land either at Naples or on the coast of Tuscany, or even in France. Your Majesty is aware that the Lord of the Isle of Elba has maintained relations with Italy and France. Yes, monsieur, I know, replied the king, greatly agitated, and lately we have been informed of Bonapartist meetings in the Rue Saint-Jacques. Whence have you your details? Sorry, I have them from a man whom I have been watching for some time past, and for whose arrest I gave orders the day before my departure from Marseille. He is a turbulent sailor who I am suspected of Bonapartism, and he has been secretly to Elba. There he saw the Grand Marechal, who entrusted him with a verbal mission to a Bonapartist in Paris, whose name he would not disclose. The nature of the mission was to prepare the adherents of Bonaparte for a return. Note, sire, these are the very men's words, for a return which must take place very shortly. Where is this man? In prison, sire. Do you think the thing is serious? Sire, I fear it is more than a mere plot. It is a conspiracy. In these days it is easy to plan a conspiracy, the king answered, smiling. But it is difficult to carry out for the simple reason that, being recently re-established on the throne of our ancestors, we have our eyes at once on the past, the present, and the future. If Bonaparte landed at Naples, the whole coalition would be at his heels before he reached Piombino. If he landed in Tuscany, he would be in a hostile country, whereas if he landed in France, he would have but a handful of men, and we should soon overpower him. At this moment, the Minister of Police entered, pale and trembling, and with a scared look. Bonaparte, trying to make a comeback. I hope you all have a good New Year, and I'll see you in 2023.